I turned 70 years old in an empty living room with a cake I'd bought for myself, and candles I almost didn't light because what's the point of making a wish when the people you'd wish for don't even bother to show up? Before you click away, let me tell you something. I need you to hear this story because it might save you from making the same mistakes I did. And if you've ever felt invisible to the people you sacrificed everything for, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. You're not alone. I promise you that. And please, check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about people like us who refuse to stay broken. My name is Eleanor, though for the last 43 years, I was known as Eleanor Whitmore, wife of successful architect James Whitmore, mother to 3 children who I believed hung the moon and stars. I spent decades building a life that looked perfect from the outside. Beautiful home in Connecticut. Kids in good schools. Charity galas. Garden parties. The kind of life you see in magazines and think, she must be so happy. I wasn't happy. I was useful. There's a difference, and it took me 70 years and one devastating birthday to understand it. The divorce happened 3 years ago. After James left me for a woman named Vanessa, 38 years old, never married, no children, and so full of energy and youth and possibility that I felt like a piece of antique furniture someone was finally throwing away. He didn't cheat. Not technically. He just fell out of love. That's what he said. Fell out of love. Like it was something that just happened to him, like catching a cold or losing your keys. Not something he chose. Not something he worked toward by staying late at the office, by forgetting anniversaries, by looking at me like I was wallpaper. The settlement was generous. He felt guilty, I think. Or maybe his lawyers were worried I'd fight harder if he didn't make it worth my while. $6 million. The house. My car. And the promise that he'd still be there for the kids, our 3 children, who by then were adults with lives of their own. Rebecca was 39, living in Boston with her husband and 2 teenagers. Thomas was 36, divorced himself, working in finance in Manhattan. And Sophie, my baby, was 33, engaged to a man I'd met twice and married to her career in graphic design. When James left, the kids rallied around me for about 3 weeks. Phone calls. Visits. Concern that felt genuine. But then life went on, their lives specifically, and I became the sad divorced mom they checked on occasionally, the way you might check on a neighbor's cat when they're out of town. Dutifully. Without much feeling. I didn't blame them at first. They had their own problems. Rebecca's son was struggling in school. Thomas was dealing with custody arrangements with his ex-wife. Sophie was planning a wedding. They were busy. I understood. I'd raised them to be independent, after all. To build their own lives. I just didn't realize that building their own lives meant there'd be no room left for me in them. So I spent 3 years in that big empty house, learning how to be alone. I took up painting. Terrible paintings of flowers and landscapes that I'd never show anyone. I volunteered at the local library. I had lunch with friends who were also divorced or widowed, and we'd talk about our children with a mix of pride and longing that probably made us look pathetic. I went to therapy. Dr. Patricia Brennan, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gift for asking questions that made me cry, helped me understand that I'd spent my entire adult life defined by other people. Wife. Mother. Volunteer. Hostess. Never just Eleanor. Never just me. And then my 70th birthday approached, and I decided to do something meaningful. Something that would bring my family together one more time in a way that mattered. I'd held on to that $6 million, barely touching it except for living expenses and some modest investments. I didn't need much. The house was paid off. I had my own retirement savings from before the marriage. That divorce settlement money was supposed to be my security, my cushion, my proof that I'd spent 4 decades building something that had value. But what's the point of security when you're lonely? What's the point of money when the people you love treat you like an obligation? I decided I would divide the $6 million equally among my 3 children. $2 million each. Life-changing money. Money that could pay off Rebecca's mortgage, fund her kids' college education. Money that could help Thomas finally buy that apartment he'd been renting in the city. Money that could give Sophie and her fiancé the wedding of her dreams and a down payment on a house. I would announce it at my birthday dinner. I'd already called a lawyer, set up the trusts, arranged everything. All three of them knew about the dinner. I'd told them months in advance. My 70th birthday. The big one. The milestone. I'd made reservations at Marcello's, the Italian restaurant where James and I had celebrated our 20th anniversary, back when we still celebrated things together. I'd ordered a special cake. I'd bought a new dress, navy blue with silver threads, elegant but not trying too hard. I'd imagined their faces when I told them. The shock. The gratitude. The tears. The way they'd hug me and tell me they loved me and maybe, just maybe, realize that I wasn't just their mother. I was a person who'd sacrificed and saved and planned for their future even after they'd drifted away. 3 days before my birthday, Rebecca called. Her voice had that apologetic tone before she even said the words. I knew. Somehow I knew. She couldn't make it. Thomas couldn't make it. Sophie couldn't make it. Why? Because James, their father, my ex-husband, was having a party. His 60th birthday. And Vanessa had planned this big celebration, invited everyone, rented out some trendy venue in Manhattan. And the kids felt like they had to go. Had to show support. Had to be there for Dad. My birthday was on a Saturday. James's party was the same night. Rebecca tried to explain it to me like I was a child who needed gentle handling. They tried to get Dad to move his party. But Vanessa had already put down deposits. Sent invitations. It was too late to change. And since Dad's birthday was actually the week before, and he was turning 60, which was kind of a big deal, and Vanessa had worked so hard on it, they'd make it up to me. We could have dinner the next weekend. Or maybe brunch on Sunday. They were so sorry. They loved me. They hoped I understood. I told Rebecca I understood. I used the same calm, reasonable voice I'd used when she was 16 and forgot to tell me she'd be staying at a friend's house, leaving me worried and calling hospitals. The voice that said everything was fine when nothing was fine. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for 2 hours, watching the light change through the window, feeling something inside me crystallize and harden. If you've ever been the second choice, if you've ever been the one people apologize to instead of showing up for, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Like I'd spent 70 years being the person who accommodated everyone else's needs, and somehow I'd become so good at it that people forgot I had needs at all. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough over the years. Over James. Over loneliness. Over the slow realization that the life I'd built had been built on sand. Instead, I got up, walked to my study, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the trust documents my lawyer had prepared. The ones that would transfer $2 million to each of my children. The ones I'd been so excited to sign and present. And I started typing an email to my attorney. I had a new plan. A better plan. A plan that would teach my children something I should have taught them years ago. That love isn't something you take for granted, that presence matters more than promises, and that sometimes the people you overlook are the ones holding everything together. I was going to make them compete for what they'd treated as inevitable. And I was going to watch very carefully to see which of them, if any, actually cared enough to try. The birthday dinner reservation sat unused. The cake I'd ordered went stale on my counter. And I spent my 70th birthday alone, making calls and arrangements that would change everything. But that night, as I blew out the candles I'd lit for myself, I made a wish after all. I wished for clarity. For truth. For my children to finally see me, not as someone who existed to serve them, but as someone who deserved to be chosen. What I didn't know yet was how brutal that clarity would become, how ugly that truth would look, and how much it would cost all of us before we found our way through it. If we ever did. I waited until the following Wednesday to call the family meeting. I wanted them comfortable again, settled back into their routines, past whatever guilt they'd felt about missing my birthday. I wanted them relaxed. Unsuspecting. I sent a group text, the way we always communicated now, quick and impersonal, saying I had important financial news to discuss and needed everyone on a video call Thursday evening at 7. No exceptions. They all agreed immediately. Of course they did. When it came to money, my children were suddenly very available. Thomas responded within minutes. Rebecca sent back 3 thumbs-up emojis. Sophie wrote, "Can't wait to hear, Mom. Love you." With a string of hearts that felt both genuine and automatic, the way you'd sign off on any message to your mother. I spent that week preparing. Not just the documents and the plan. My lawyer, Gordon, had already helped me restructure everything, but myself. My resolve. My delivery. I practiced in front of the bathroom mirror, watching my face, making sure I looked calm and certain. Not angry. Never angry. Disappointed people make scenes. Powerful people make decisions. I thought about backing out a dozen times. Late Tuesday night, I stood in Sophie's childhood bedroom, looking at the faded posters she'd left on the walls, the shelf of soccer trophies, the bulletin board still pinned with photos of her and her high school friends. I thought about how she used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms, how she'd hold my hand in parking lots long after she was too old for it. I thought about how Rebecca used to call me every single day during her first pregnancy, anxious and excited and needing her mother. How Thomas, after his divorce, had shown up at my door at 2 a.m. and cried in my arms for an hour. They weren't monsters. They were just busy, distracted, forgetful, human. But so was I. And I'd been busy and distracted and human for 7 decades, and I'd still shown up. For every recital and game and graduation. For every breakup and job interview and crisis. Even after the divorce, even after they'd slowly faded from weekly visits to monthly phone calls to texts that sometimes took days to answer, I'd shown up. Sent birthday cards. Remembered their children's names and interests. Asked about their lives and actually listened to the answers. When had they last asked about mine? Thursday evening came. I set up my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed them breakfast before school for 18 years, where we'd done homework and had family dinners back when family dinners were still a thing we did. I wore a burgundy sweater, my mother's pearl earrings, and reading glasses I didn't actually need, armor, all of it, making me look distinguished and serious. At 7 sharp, I started the video call. Rebecca appeared first, calling from what looked like her kitchen. I could hear her husband in the background, talking to one of the kids. She was wearing a sweatshirt, hair in a messy bun, and she gave me a distracted smile. Thomas joined next, in a button-down shirt, clearly still at his office or pretending to be. His apartment was dark behind him. Sophie was last, bubbly and bright, waving at the camera with both hands. "Hi, Mom," she chirped. "Sorry, I'm a little late. Traffic was insane." "It's fine," I said. My voice was steady. "Thank you all for making time." "Of course," Rebecca said, though her eyes flicked to something off-screen. "So what's the big news? You sounded mysterious." I took a breath. This was it. The moment I'd rehearsed. The moment that would either wake them up or confirm everything I feared about how little I mattered. "I want to talk to you about my estate," I began. "As you know, when your father and I divorced, I received a significant settlement. $6 million. All 3 of them went very still. Even Thomas, who dealt with money for a living, looked suddenly focused. "I've spent the last 3 years thinking about what to do with that money," I continued. "Originally, I planned to divide it equally among the 3 of you. $2 million each. I'd set up trusts, arranged everything with my attorney. I was going to announce it at my birthday dinner." Rebecca's face changed. A flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or realization. Thomas just stared. Sophie's smile faltered. "But obviously that dinner didn't happen," I said. No accusation in my voice. Just fact. And in the days after my birthday, I had time to think. To really evaluate what I want my legacy to be. What I want to teach you, even now. "Mom," Rebecca started, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish, please." She closed her mouth. They all waited. "I've decided that the money, all $6 million, will go to whichever one of you demonstrates consistent, genuine care for me over the next 5 years. From now until my 75th birthday." Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Then Thomas, "What?" "The money will be awarded to the child who shows up," I said. "Not with grand gestures or guilt-driven visits after you realize you've forgotten about me, but with consistent presence. Phone calls. Visits. Interest in my life. The kind of relationship I spent decades trying to build with each of you." "You're making us compete?" Sophie's voice was small, confused. For your money? For your inheritance, I corrected. Yes. I am. Rebecca's face had gone red. Mom, this is insane. You can't. This is manipulative. Is it? I kept my voice level. Was it manipulative when I rearranged my entire life around your needs? When I gave up my career to raise you? When I stayed in a marriage long past its expiration date because I thought it was best for the family? Or is it only manipulative when I finally ask for something in return? That's not fair, Thomas said. We have lives, jobs, families. So did I said. I had a life too. I still do. But somehow, I always found time for you. Even when it was inconvenient. Even when I was tired. Even when you forgot my birthday to go party with your father and his mistress-turned-girlfriend. The word mistress hung in the air. It wasn't accurate. Vanessa hadn't started dating James until after the divorce, but it felt true in all the ways that mattered. She's not his mistress, Sophie said quietly. And we didn't forget your birthday. We just chose him over me. I know. I nodded. And that's fine. You're allowed to make choices. But so am I. And I choose to give my money to the child who actually wants a relationship with me, not just an inheritance. If you've ever had to set a boundary with people you love, people who've taken you for granted so long they don't even realize they're doing it, you know how terrifying it is. How part of you expects them to fight for you, to wake up and apologize and promise to do better. And how part of you knows they might not. That they might choose their convenience over your worth. There are rules, I continued, pulling out the document Gordon had prepared. I'll visit each of you once a month, unannounced. You won't know when I'm coming. If you're not available, if you're too busy or you forgot, or you have other plans, that's noted. I'll also track phone calls, texts, visits you initiate. Quality, not just quantity. Gordon will keep records. Everything documented. This is crazy, Rebecca said again. You're punishing us for having lives. I'm rewarding whoever makes me a priority, I said. There's a difference. Thomas leaned forward. And what if none of us play your game? Then the money goes to charity, I said simply. The children's hospital where Sophie was born. The library I volunteer at. Places that could use it. I don't need it. I never did. But I thought you might want it. I thought it might motivate you to. Remember I exist. Sophie was crying now. Quiet tears streaming down her face. Mom, please. This isn't. We love you. I know you do, I said, and my voice softened for the first time. But love isn't just a feeling, sweetheart. It's a choice you make every day. And lately, you haven't been choosing me. So what? Thomas's voice was hard. Defensive. You're going to dangle money in front of us and make us dance for it like we're your performing monkeys? No, I said. I'm going to give $6 million to whichever one of my children actually wants to know me as a person. Whichever one cares enough to call and ask how I'm doing. To visit not because it's Christmas or my birthday, but because they miss me. To include me in their lives instead of treating me like an item on a checklist. I looked at each of them. Rebecca, still angry. Thomas, calculating. Sophie, heartbroken. 5 years, I said. That's all. 5 years of showing up. Of being present. Of treating me the way I treated you for your entire lives. And at the end, one of you will receive everything. Or none of us, Thomas said. Or none of you, I agreed. If you all fail. If none of you can manage to maintain a relationship with your mother for 5 years, then yes, you'll get nothing. And honestly, that would tell me everything I need to know. Rebecca shook her head. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe it took me 70 years to do it, I replied. And then I ended the call. Just like that. Before they could argue more. Before I could second-guess myself. Before the tears I'd been holding back could fall. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that, listening to the silence, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or the bravest decision I'd ever made. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Texts from all three of them. Angry. Confused. Hurt. I didn't answer. Not that night. I'd spent 70 years answering. Responding. Accommodating. Explaining myself. For once, they could sit with their feelings without me rushing to fix them. For once, they could decide what I was worth to them. And I could finally stop begging for scraps of attention from the people I'd given everything to. The game had begun. And I had no idea how it would end. The first 3 months were exactly what I expected: radio silence, followed by performative concern, followed by resentment that I wasn't making it easier for them. Rebecca texted the morning after our call. A long paragraph about how hurt she was, how she didn't appreciate being manipulated, how she'd always been there for me and this was unfair and cruel. I read it twice, then put my phone face down on the counter and made myself eggs for breakfast. By the time I picked it up again, there were 6 more messages. Each one angrier than the last. I responded with one line: I love you. The terms stand. Thomas went the opposite direction. Complete silence for 2 weeks, then suddenly he was calling every day. Brief calls, 5 minutes or less, clearly checking a box. Hey mom, just touching base. How are you? Good. Great. Talk soon. Then he'd be gone before I could tell him anything real. I started keeping track in a small notebook: date, time, duration, whether he seemed actually interested or just going through the motions. Gordon had suggested the notebook. Evidence, he called it. I called it heartbreaking. Sophie showed up at my house unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the video call. She'd been crying in her car before she knocked on my door. I could tell by her puffy eyes and the mascara smudges she'd tried to wipe away. I don't understand, she said, standing in my entryway like a stranger. I don't understand how you could do this to us. I made her tea. Chamomile, the kind she used to drink in college during finals week. We sat at the kitchen table, and I waited for her to continue. It feels like you're making us prove we love you, she said finally. And I do love you, Mom. I always have. But I'm planning a wedding and working 60 hours a week and trying to build a life. And now I'm supposed to, what? Visit you constantly? Call you every day? Just so you'll give me money. Not for the money, I said quietly. For me. But you're tying them together, she said. That's the problem. You're making the money conditional on us performing love in the exact way you want it. No, I said. I'm making the money conditional on effort. On presence. On you treating me like I matter in your life, not like I'm some obligation you get around to when it's convenient. She looked at her tea. We've been bad at staying in touch. I know that. But threatening to cut us out. I'm not cutting you out, I interrupted. You're all still my children. I'll always love you. But the money? That's mine to do with as I please. And I've decided to give it to whoever actually shows up for me. That's not a punishment. It's a choice. Just like you chose your father's birthday party over mine. Her face crumpled. I'm sorry about that. We all are. It was bad timing and we made the wrong call and you'd do it again, I said. Not a question. A fact. She didn't deny it. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sophie, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I need to know that my children see me. That I'm not just a name in your phone you feel guilty about ignoring. And if it takes $6 million to motivate you to build an actual relationship with me, then fine. At least I'll know the relationship is real before I die. Before you, Mom, don't say that. I'm 70 years old, I said. That's not morbid. It's realistic. And I'd like to spend whatever time I have left with people who want to be there. Not people who show up out of obligation. She left after an hour. Hugged me at the door. Promised she'd try harder. Promised this wasn't about the money for her. I watched her drive away and wrote in my notebook, Sophie, September 14th, 4:15 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Genuine conversation. Initiated by her. Tears. Apology. Promising. And then I went back inside my empty house and wondered if any of them would actually change, or if I just sentenced myself to 5 years of watching them fail. Check the description box below for more stories about family, betrayal, and the complicated love between parents and children. Because you're going to want to hear what happened next. The months dragged on. Each one bringing new patterns, new strategies, new disappointments. Rebecca tried to brute force it. She started calling twice a week, like clockwork. Tuesday and Friday evenings, 6 p.m. sharp. But the calls were always rushed. She'd put me on speakerphone while she cooked dinner or drove her kids to soccer practice. I could hear her divided attention, the way she'd forget what I'd told her from one call to the next. Once, I mentioned I'd been to the doctor for a routine checkup. The following week, she asked if I had any doctor's appointments coming up. She'd completely forgotten I'd already gone. Thomas tried to buy his way back in. He sent flowers. Expensive ones, delivered to my door with cards that said things like "thinking of you" and "love, Thomas." He took me to expensive restaurants once a month, places where the menu didn't have prices and the waiters called you madam. But he spent the dinners checking his phone, talking about work, asking nothing about my life. I was a prop in his performance of being a good son. Sophie, surprisingly, was the one who tried the hardest. She started calling in the mornings before work, just 10 or 15 minutes, but present. Actually listening. She'd ask what I was painting, what I was reading. She invited me to her apartment for dinner twice in 4 months. Not much, but more than her siblings managed. And she remembered things. Actual details about my life. The names of my friends. The charity event I was planning for the library. But she was also exhausted. I could hear it in her voice. The weight of performing for me. The resentment creeping in around the edges. One night, she called me crying. It was late, past 11. I'd been reading in bed. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "Mom, I can't. I love you, I want to be close to you, but it feels like you're watching me all the time. Like I'm being tested. And I'm failing." "You're not failing," I said, sitting up in bed. "Yes, I am. I forgot to call you last week when I said I would. And I know you noticed. I know you wrote it down in that notebook you're keeping." I had noticed. I had written it down. But hearing her say it made me feel monstrous. "Sophie." "No, let me finish. I get what you're doing. I understand why. We were shitty to you. We took you for granted. We still do. But this competition, this surveillance, it's not making us closer. It's making me anxious every time I think about you. And that's not love. That's not what you want, is it?" I didn't answer right away. Because she was right. This wasn't what I wanted. I wanted them to choose me freely. To want to know me because I was interesting and valuable, not because there was money attached. But would they ever have chosen me without the money? Would any of them have changed at all? "What do you want me to do?" I asked finally. "Give you the money anyway? Pretend the last 70 years didn't happen? Pretend my birthday didn't matter?" "No," she whispered. I want my mom back. Not this person who's keeping score." "I've always kept score," I said, and my voice broke. "I just never told you. I counted every missed call. Every cancelled visit. Every time you said you'd come by and didn't. I just absorbed it. Smiled. Told myself you were busy. That it was fine. But it wasn't fine, Sophie. And I can't keep pretending it is." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "So what now?" "Now you decide," I said. "You decide if I'm worth the effort. Not the money. Me. And if I'm not, if this is too hard, if you'd rather have your life back without your difficult, demanding mother in it, then stop trying. Really. I mean it. Walk away and at least we'll both know the truth." She hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks after that. And it nearly broke me. Because I'd meant what I said. I'd rather know the truth, even if the truth was that they didn't really want me, than keep living in this limbo of false effort and obligatory affection. But knowing the truth and surviving it are two different things. The first year ended with a tally I couldn't stop reviewing. Rebecca had called 53 times, visited 4 times, sent 32 text messages. All documented. All perfunctory. Thomas had called 48 times, visited once, my birthday, the one that counted, though he'd shown up an hour late and left after 90 minutes, sent gifts worth approximately $4,000. Sophie had called 71 times, visited 7 times, invited me to her life on 12 separate occasions. On paper, Sophie was winning. But winning what? A relationship that felt like work for both of us? Money she'd spend the next 4 years resenting me for making her earn? I sat in my study on the night of my 71st birthday, which all 3 of them remembered this time, because of course they did, and I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Not because the plan wasn't working, but because it was working exactly as I'd feared. I was getting their attention, their time, their presence. But I still didn't have what I'd actually wanted all along, their love freely given, without conditions, without scorekeeping, without the bitter taste of obligation. And I was starting to wonder if that was something you could ever get back once you'd lost it. Year 2 changed everything. Not because something dramatic happened. There was no intervention, no tearful reunion, no moment of perfect clarity that fixed everything. Instead, something quieter shifted. Something that scared me more than all their anger and resentment combined. They stopped trying so hard. Rebecca was the first to drop off. The twice-weekly phone calls became once a week, then every other week, then sporadic. When I called her, she'd sound surprised to hear from me, like I was a distant relative she'd forgotten existed. The visits stopped altogether. She sent a text in March, 4 months into year 2, saying she needed to focus on her family right now, and hoped I understood. I did understand. I understood that I'd lost her completely. That whatever relationship we'd had was too far gone to resurrect with money or guilt or any amount of effort. Thomas kept up his routine for another 3 months, then sent me an email. An actual email, formal and cold, explaining that he'd given this considerable thought, and decided that participating in a competition for affection wasn't healthy for either of us. He'd always love me. He'd always be my son. But he was removing himself from the contest effective immediately. That left Sophie. And Sophie was crumbling. She'd kept trying through year 1 and into year 2, but the effort was destroying her. Her engagement ended in January. Her fiancé couldn't handle her stress, her constant guilt, her divided attention. She blamed me. She probably wasn't wrong. One Saturday in April, she showed up at my house without calling first. It was early, before 8 in the morning. I answered the door in my bathrobe, alarmed by her appearance. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I need to know something," she said, pushing past me into the house. "I need you to be honest with me." "Sophie, what's wrong? Is this even real?" she asked, turning to face me. "The money. The competition. Is it actually real, or were you just trying to teach us some kind of lesson?" I stared at her. "Of course it's real. But you wouldn't actually cut Rebecca and Thomas out completely. You wouldn't actually give everything to me just because I'm the only one still playing your game." "It's not a game," I said quietly. "Then what is it?" Her voice rose. "Because it's not love. It's not family. It's conditional. It's transactional. And I don't know if I'm doing this because I actually want a relationship with you or because I can't let $6 million go." The truth of that statement hung between us. The ugly, honest truth. "I don't know either," I admitted. She laughed, sharp and bitter. "At least you're honest." "Sophie. No, you know what? I'm done. I'm done trying to figure out if I love you enough or if you're asking too much or whose fault this is. I'm done keeping track of phone calls and visits and whether I'm winning your approval. I'm done." And she walked out. Just like that. Got in her car and drove away. That was April. I didn't hear from any of them for the rest of the spring. I'd wanted them to wake up. I'd wanted them to realize I mattered. Instead, I'd driven them away completely. All 3 of them. I spent those months in a fog of regret so thick I could barely see through it. I stopped painting. Stopped volunteering. I went to therapy twice a week and Dr. Brennan tried, she really did, to help me understand what I'd done and why and whether it could be fixed. You set a boundary, she said in one session in May. A harsh one, maybe. But you set a boundary with people who'd been crossing your boundaries for decades. That's not wrong, Eleanor. It feels wrong, I said. It feels like I've destroyed my family over money. Did you destroy your family? She asked. Or did you reveal how broken it already was? I couldn't answer that. Because both felt true. If you've ever tried to fix something by breaking it first, if you've ever taken a stand and then watched everything fall apart, you know the doubt that creeps in. The voice that says maybe you should have just stayed quiet, stayed accommodating, stayed invisible. At least then you'd still have something, even if it was just the illusion of love. In June, on a Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I almost didn't answer. But something made me get up from the couch where I'd been reading, walk to the door, and open it. Rebecca stood on my porch. Behind her, in the driveway, I could see her car. And in the back seat, two teenagers scrolling on their phones. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her voice was quiet, tentative. "Rebecca." I couldn't hide my surprise. "What are you doing here? Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked past me into the living room, and I noticed she was carrying something, a manila folder. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then she held out the folder. "What is this?" I asked. "Letters," she said. "From the last year and a half. Letters I wrote to you but never sent." I took the folder but didn't open it. Just held it, looking at her. "After Thomas quit and Sophie had her breakdown," Rebecca continued, "I spent a lot of time thinking. About what you said. About what we did. About who I've been as a daughter." She paused, swallowing hard. "I was so angry at you. For the competition. For the manipulation, as I saw it. For making everything about money." "It was never about money," I said quietly. "I know that now." She nodded. But I couldn't see it then. All I could see was you dangling this inheritance over our heads and forcing us to perform. And I was so self-righteous about refusing to participate. Like I was taking the moral high ground. She sat down on the couch without asking, and I joined her, still holding the folder. "But the thing is," she continued, "once I stopped calling you, stopped visiting, stopped trying, I realized something. I didn't miss you." The words hit like a slap. I felt my chest tighten. "Not at first," she added quickly. "Not for weeks. And that's what scared me. That's what made me start writing these letters. Because I couldn't understand how I could go weeks without thinking about my own mother. How I could be so busy, so consumed with my own life, that you just disappeared from my mind." She looked at me, and her eyes were wet. "You were right, Mom. We took you for granted. We treated you like you'd always be there, waiting in the wings, ready to show up whenever we needed you but never needing anything from us in return." "You had your own lives," I said. "That's what I wanted. I raised you to be independent." "There's independent and there's neglectful," Rebecca said. "And we were neglectful. All three of us. And when you finally called us out on it, instead of acknowledging it and changing, we got defensive. We made you the villain." I opened the folder. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, dated over the past year. I pulled out the first one. It was dated September, just 3 months after Sophie had walked out. "Dear Mom. I'm writing this because I don't know how else to process what I'm feeling. You were wrong to make us compete for your money. But I was wrong to miss your birthday. And I think both those things can be true at the same time. Asterisk. I keep thinking about all the times you showed up for me. When Sarah was born and I was terrified and you stayed with me for 2 weeks. When my marriage was struggling and you listened to me cry for hours without judging. When I lost my job and you told me I was capable of anything. Asterisk. When have I done that for you? I can't remember the last time I asked how you were doing and actually listened to the answer." I looked up at her, unable to speak. "I wrote one every week," she said. "Sometimes more. Every time I thought about calling you and didn't. Every time I remembered something you'd done for me. Every time I realized how badly I'd failed you. Rebecca. I'm not here for the money, she interrupted. I need you to know that. Thomas was right about one thing. This competition was toxic. It turned something that should have been about love into something transactional. But he was wrong about the solution. Walking away didn't fix anything. It just made me a coward who couldn't face what I'd done. She reached over and took my hand. I'm here because I want to know you. Not the version of you who exists to serve my needs. The actual you. The woman who paints terrible flower pictures and volunteers at the library and has a whole life I know nothing about because I never bothered to ask. The tears came then. For both of us. Years of them. Decades. I don't know if we can fix this, she said through her crying. I don't know if you can forgive me. But I want to try. Not for 5 years. Not for the inheritance. Just try. To have a real relationship with my mother before it's too late. We sat there crying together for a long time. Eventually, I pulled her into a hug, and she held on tight, the way she used to when she was small. The kids are in the car, she said finally, pulling back and wiping her eyes. I brought them because I wanted you to know this isn't just about us. I want them to know their grandmother. Really know her. If you'll let us. I nodded, unable to form words. She called her teenagers in, Madison, 16, and Christopher, 14, and they were awkward and resistant the way teenagers are, but they came. And we sat in my living room, and I asked them about school and their friends and their lives, and Rebecca didn't interrupt or check her phone or rush us along. When they left, 3 hours later, Rebecca hugged me at the door and said, I'll call you Tuesday. Not because I'm supposed to. Because I want to hear your voice. And she did. She called Tuesday. And Friday. And the following Monday just to tell me about something funny that happened at work. And slowly, over the following months, we started building something new. Something that felt less like obligation and more like actual connection. Thomas never came back. He sent a card on my 72nd birthday with a generic message about wishing me well. I wrote him back, told him I loved him, told him the door was always open. But I accepted that he'd made his choice. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. At least not in the time we had left. Sophie did come back, but it took longer. Almost a year. She showed up on my porch in March of year 3, looking healthier than she had in months. She'd been in therapy. Working on herself. And she wanted to try again, but differently this time. No scorekeeping, she said. No counting calls or visits. No competition. Just us, figuring out how to be in each other's lives in a way that's healthy for both of us. I agreed. And we tried. It was hard. There were setbacks and arguments and sessions where old resentments bubbled up. But we kept trying. In July of year 4, I called Gordon into my office. Well, his office. But you know what I mean. I want to change the terms, I told him. He raised an eyebrow. Change them how? I want to split the money differently. 2 million to Rebecca. 2 million to Sophie. 1 million to Thomas, even though he's not speaking to me. And 1 million to charity. That's not what we agreed, Gordon said. The terms were. I know what the terms were. But the terms were wrong. I leaned forward. I wanted to force them to see me. To make them prove they loved me. But love isn't something you can force or measure or win in a competition. It either exists or it doesn't. And I'd rather give them the money and let them decide what to do with it, and with me, than keep holding it over their heads. So Rebecca wins? Gordon asked. Nobody wins, I said. That's the point. There are no winners in this. Just a family that's trying to repair itself after decades of slow damage. He drew up the new documents. I signed them. And I called Rebecca and Sophie and told them what I'd decided. I'm still keeping the 5-year timeline, I said. Because I want to see how we grow together over that time. But the money is yours whether you call me every day or never speak to me again. I can't buy your love. I was wrong to try. Rebecca cried. Sophie cried. I cried. And then Sophie said, I would have kept trying anyway. Even without the money. You know that, right? I do now, I said. This past October, I turned 74 years old. Rebecca threw me a party at her house. Small. Just family. Her kids, her husband, Sophie, and her new girlfriend. Yes, girlfriend, which was a surprise but a wonderful one. Thomas didn't come. But he sent a gift. A book about watercolor painting techniques. Which meant he remembered I painted. Which was something. We ate cake. We told stories. Madison gave a speech about how her grandmother was the strongest person she knew, which made me cry into my wine. And later, when everyone was saying goodbye, Rebecca pulled me aside. Thank you, she said. For what? For not giving up on us. For setting that boundary, even though it was brutal. For loving us enough to make us uncomfortable. For still being here. I hugged her tight. I'm not going anywhere. Good, she whispered. Because we're not either. 1 year left. 1 more year until my 75th birthday, until the money transfers officially, until this strange chapter of our lives closes. But honestly, the money doesn't matter anymore. Not to me. Maybe not even to them. What matters is that I have my daughters back. Not perfectly. Not without scars. But really back. In my life. In my heart. And Thomas. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But I've learned that you can't force people to love you, and you can't punish them into caring. All you can do is decide what you're worth. Set your boundaries. And wait to see who respects them. Some people will walk away. And that will hurt more than you can imagine. But the ones who stay, the ones who do the hard work of rebuilding, those are the relationships worth having. I spent 70 years being convenient. Being easy. Being the person who absorbed everyone else's needs and never asked for anything in return. And then I spent 1 terrible, beautiful, devastating year asking for something. Demanding to be seen. It cost me 1 son, at least temporarily. It cost me years of peace. It cost me the fantasy that everything was fine. But it gave me the truth. And the truth, as brutal as it was, set me free. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing witness. And if you're in a similar place, invisible to the people you love, wondering if you matter, please know this. You do matter. Your presence is not a burden. Your needs are not unreasonable. And it is never, ever too late to ask for what you deserve. Even if it costs you everything. Even if people walk away. Even if you have to rebuild from the ground up. You are worth the effort. You are worth being chosen. And if the people in your life can't see that, then maybe it's time to find people who can. Or maybe it's time to stand alone for a while, until you remember your own worth without needing anyone else to validate it. I'm 74 years old. I spent most of my life giving everything to everyone else. And I've spent these last few years learning how to give something back to myself. Self-respect. Boundaries. The courage to say, I matter and mean it. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. And the most important. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Don't wait until you're 70 to demand to be seen. Don't waste decades hoping people will change without giving them a reason to. Don't make yourself so small and convenient that you disappear from your own life. Speak up. Set boundaries. Walk away from people who can't appreciate your worth. And if you have parents who loved you, who sacrificed for you, who are still here and still trying, call them. Visit them. Ask about their lives. See them as people, not just as roles they play in your story. Because one day they'll be gone. And you'll be left with all these regrets and I should haves, and the terrible knowledge that you took them for granted until it was too late. Don't be my children in year 1. Be my children in year 4. Do it now, while you still have time. And if you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, if you're the parent who's been overlooked, the person who's been taken for granted, know that it's okay to ask for more. It's okay to say, this isn't enough. It's okay to set terms and boundaries and expectations, even if people call you manipulative or difficult or demanding. Your life matters. Your feelings matter. You matter. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a place in your life, money or no money. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to an old woman's story about love and loss and the messy work of rebuilding. Please check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about real people facing real struggles and finding their way through. Stories about family and betrayal and redemption. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you think or feel or reconsider your own relationships, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be invisible. Because we all deserve to be seen. We all deserve to be chosen. And we all deserve to matter. Take care of yourselves. And take care of each other. This is Eleanor, signing off.